what information do you need to have in the email?
Your pitch emails need to be short and sweet. They need to have a clear call to action, and they need to be personalized. Those are the three most important things. They need to be short and sweet. There need to be a clear call to action. They need to be personalized. On the short and sweet thing, you don't want any information in there that's nebulous. You want to say who you are, why you're emailing them, and you want to give them a reason to read the email. And then you want to make sure that they know what you want out of the email. If you want your music to get in their roster, you could say like, hey, I'd love to be in your roster, but that's a pretty passive call to action. A more active one could be, is this music the right fit for your roster? Ask them a question so they can answer you, because that's what you want to know.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. I'm super excited for this week's guest, Noah Tauscher. He's an independent musician originally from Hood River, Oregon, which is a small town in the state of Oregon, right on the border of Washington State. Noah now lives in Los Angeles and makes his entire living off of sync licensing. He has had placements with AMC, Netflix, Fender, and many, many other companies. So in this conversation, Noah takes all of his information he's learned over the years by working with other music professionals in the sync space to share it with all of you. He discusses how to pitch to music supervisors, what your pitch should include, what should be on your website, and even just how to get into sync licensing, because a lot of musicians are stuck and don't really know which steps to take. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to remind you to subscribe to my email list. It's on Substack. It's the best way to be notified about new episodes and Music Business Musings. I share all kinds of advice there, and I would recommend that you sign up so you don't miss anything. I would also appreciate a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps the show get discovered by new listeners. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, all those social media links are in the show notes below, so check those out if you're interested in following me and keeping up to date with the podcast. Lastly, if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for this podcast, there's a link in the show notes below as well for a guest request form. Please fill that out. I'm always looking for guests in the sync licensing space, music technology, and just music professionals all around, specifically in the dance music space. So with all of that information out of the way, I'm really excited to introduce to you and get started in my conversation with the incredibly talented Noah Tauscher.
I'm from a little town in Northern Oregon called Hood River, and I grew up in a pretty musical family. My grandmother was an opera singer, and then when my mom was about 30, she was in Seattle and heard this Zimbabwean marimba band playing and just fell in love with that music, ended up devoting like 20 some years to it. So we would always be hosting Zimbabwean marimba bands at our house. Like every summer there'd be bands coming through, and she would teach classes and run workshops with the bands to teach the people in our community how to play marimba. So I was playing that from like age 2. Like before I could walk, I was like hitting this big wooden xylophone with mallets. And that's what got me into music. Kind of a funny hippie upbringing. And it's funny, there's like a bunch of inside jokes in my friend groups because I know very little classic rock or just classic music, like music from like the 80s to like the early 2000s. I am blind to. Okay. Because I grew up only listening to like marimba music. So I have like a huge blind spot, but I also think it gives me like a unique perspective, which is cool. Yeah. And then I started writing music when I was in high school. Honestly, I think the impetus for that was just like to try, and I think one of the first songs I ever wrote was to try and ask a girl to homecoming. So it was like, I was just trying to appeal to romance in my life. And then I got more and more into it, ended up studying it at school. And then after college, I traveled for a while and moved to Los Angeles to pursue an artist project, my own artist project, releasing music on my own name, hopefully getting record deals and going on tour. And after about 6 months, COVID hit, and I realized, man, there's just no way I'm going to be able to like make a living with this right now. So I pivoted towards producing music for sync and made my first couple sync projects and was lucky enough to get them signed. And yeah, just discovered that world, kind of like tripped backwards into it because the artist thing wasn't really happening for me. And then I was still kind of pursuing my own artist project on the side for about 2 more years after that. And then maybe a year and a half ago, I just decided, you know what, like this artist project thing is not making me happy. It's sucking so much energy out of my life, and it should be so much fun. And I'm just expressing myself, but that's not how it was. So I stopped doing that entirely. And I'm maybe in the future at some point I'll release music on my own name again, but I'm not gonna force it. So since then, it's been producing music for sync, helping other people get into sync, and helping other people monetize their music, producing music for other artists, and lo-fi music.
Okay. So what kind of music do you typically produce? Growing up in such a very niche kind of genre and style of music, marimba music, what kind of music does that lead you to produce? Are you producing, what are you producing? What are you writing? What are you writing?
I feel like as a producer in the various lanes that I'm in, I have to be eclectic.
Yeah.
You know, but of course, my go-to instruments are like guitar, as you can see. So a lot of my stuff for sync is like singer-songwriter, rock and roll, folk cinematic. But I love so many different genres of music, and that's my favorite thing about being a music producer now is I don't need to stick in a lane. With my artist project, I was also always thinking like, is this cohesive? But now I can work with 10 different artists and make 10 different styles of music and work for sync and work for lo-fi. So it's like this career path suits me so much more, and I'm so happy that I took that turn.
That's amazing. So you said you kind of stumbled upon sync. Can you tell a little, like a story, or if there's a story behind it? Like, how did that first sync come about?
Sure. I had a manager at the time who was helping me and kind of guiding me, and I was a newbie. You know, I'd only been in LA for 3 or 4 months, and he knew that I was able to write in a bunch of different styles of music, and he knew that I needed to make some money. So he actually came up with the idea of like, hey, why don't you just like do some research on companies that you think you could write music for, and then write an EP of music for that, and we'll pitch it to sync companies. And so I did that. We pitched it to some sync companies. We ended up teaming up with another producer because at the time my production skills weren't of the quality that they needed to be for things to get placed. So the other producer helped me. Like, I've gotten so much guidance, and it's been amazing. And so we ended up pitching a 6-song EP, and then one of the companies got back to us and said, hey, this is great. We want a full album. So we made a full album and gave it to them, and that was my first sync deal.
Okay. And when you say you gave it to them, who is them? Is it a sync agency? Is it a music publisher?
It's a sync label called Position Music. They're based in LA, and they're amazing. They're an awesome sync label. Would recommend, if they get the chance to work with them, they should.
Okay. And what is a sync label? Can you explain what that is?
For sure. Yeah, there seems to be a bunch of maybe confusion about this in the sync world because there's so many different entities that you can work with.
Yeah.
From my experience, from what I've learned, there are sync labels, there are sync agencies, there are sync libraries, and then there are just sync reps, which kind of work similar as sync agencies from my experience. Sync labels tend to be exclusive.
Okay.
They tend to function like a record label.
Okay.
Where you want to give them your music unreleased, preferably.
Okay.
And they help you develop the cover art. They're releasing it. They're not just looking at sync as a revenue source. They're also looking at streaming.
Okay.
And so because of that, of course, the deals are a little more toothy, a little more aggressive, because they're going to try and make you money in streaming. So they're going to take a portion of your streaming money as well.
Sure.
But it's really cool because, first off, most sync labels will pay you in advance, which is huge.
Yeah.
It's like, it was the first like big paycheck I got from making music, and it was just like, this is crazy. They'll help you come up with cover art, and they'll help you release the music. they tend to want to wait until you get placements to release the music, because then they can use those placements as release help to pitch to Spotify and everything. And also those placements may drive streams.
Okay.
I like to work with sync labels because they're a little more hands-on.
Okay.
Sync agents tend to be a little more hands-off. You know, they probably won't help you release your music. They probably won't pay you an advance, but sometimes they're not exclusive. Sometimes they're exclusive. But with sync agents, generally, you can have like real contact with them, you know, emails or getting a coffee. I think that's really important. Sync libraries tend to be a little more passive than that, where they accept a lot more music and they're pitching, but you don't really have a relationship with them as far as my experience goes. And then sync reps essentially are just small sync agencies, you know, from my experience.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing in all of this, like you could be very successful working with any of the ones that I just mentioned, any of those categories of companies. The most important thing is, one, that the company is really passionate about your music, and two, that you get one-on-one communication with someone there, because you want to be able to form that relationship. You want to be able to make that friendship, make that connection, so that when they get briefs in or when they're pitching music out, you're top of mind.
Okay. So going back just a little bit, that helps. Giving an explanation of what each one does is super helpful. The thing is when you mentioned earlier, you said that you had a producer come in and help you originally kind of fluff your music up to make sure it was up to standard. But what other things did you do to prepare for your first syncs? Like obviously making sure the music is high quality and up to standard, up to quality. What are some other things that you had to do to prepare your music before it was ready to be pitched or even placed?
Well, I'm always on TikTok. I'm always harping about the pitch. The pitch is the most important part. The music has to be amazing, but if the music is amazing and the pitch is not, it doesn't matter how good your music is. If your pitch isn't good, they're not going to listen to it. Damn. It's the like the sad truth is that so much amazing music gets pitched and goes straight to the spam or to the delete box because the email is too long. It's a download link, not a streaming link. So we worked hard on creating a pitch and a web layout that gave only the necessary information and showcased the music in a way that made the sync companies want to sign it.
So what are kind of your top couple things that you would recommend for somebody who's starting to pitch their music? I have a bazillion questions in this respect, but let's start with what information do you need to have in the email?
Your pitch emails need to be short and sweet. They need to have a clear call to action. And I'll go through these things in detail after I list them. They need to be personalized. So those are the three most important things. They need to be short and sweet. There need to be a clear call to action. They need to be personalized.
Okay.
They need to be on the short and sweet thing. You don't want any information in there that's nebulous. You want to say who you are. You want to say why you're emailing them, and you want to give them a reason to read the email. And then you want to make sure that they know what you want out of the email. So if you want your music to get in the roster, you could say like, hey, I'd love to be in your roster, but that's a pretty passive call to action. A more active one could be, is this music the right fit for your roster? Ask them a question so they can answer you, because that's what you want to know, right? Clear call to action, what we just went through. You want it to be personalized. So you don't want to send out the same email to all the sync companies, because people know. People know when you send the same email out to everybody. It feels a little dirty. So you want to make sure that you do some research into this sync company, and you want to give them a reason to honestly to trust you, So, like, mention some stuff about the company that you like. Mention some placements that you saw that you really liked. Mention, maybe you make hip hop and they don't have much hip hop. So you can mention, hey, I looked through your catalog. You don't have much hip hop. I think I would be a really good fit.
Mm.
So personalized, clear call to action, short and sweet. Oh, and then the last thing, I forgot to mention it in the list earlier, is you want to provide some sort of credentials. Whether that be social credentials, Spotify numbers, just you want to give them another reason to trust you. So mentioning that you just got some blog write-ups in this music, or mentioning another sync label that you work with, or mentioning a new song with an artist you have out, any of these things will give them more of a reason to click through to your music. Because the goal of the email is just to get them to listen to the music.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do all of those things and you keep it just to those things, you'll have a very, very good chance that they'll click through to the music.
Okay. And is the pitch different depending on who you're pitching to? So, for example, if you're pitching to a sync record label versus a sync agency versus like a music publisher, they're going to be very different. So, how do you differ between what you're pitching to?
I mean, I think it's just in the call to action. I think it just because most of the other stuff is the same. You want them to listen to your music, but the call to action may be different if you're pitching to a sync company or a publisher.
Sure.
But honestly, like, you don't need to change too much. And the coolest thing about learning how to write emails like this, I feel like such a nerd because I'm like geeking out over emails. Sorry. But being able to write really well like this opens so many doors for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get so many emails from people just saying like, hey, how do I do it? And I'm like, man, I want to help you so much, but this is such a general question. It actually takes me so much effort to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
So having a very clear and specific call to action, I think, is like the most important thing. I honestly don't think you need to differentiate them that much, of course, other than making sure that the company knows that it's not a general mass email.
Okay. So personalizing it is one of the big pluses, making sure it's personalized and it's individually sent to that person. And that's kind of the consensus I've heard of speaking with other music supervisors and sync agents and other artists who are pitching in this space. So what are some of the tools that you're using to pitch? Are you using something like Disco where you're able to upload and have all the metadata? Are you using Dropbox? How are you kind of staying organized with everything you're pitching, keeping your metadata organized, all that stuff?
Disco, on the other hand, is fucking awesome. Disco is a great tool. I pay for it every month. I use it. It looks really professional. Everyone uses it. So if you want to be pitching music in the sync game and it's not out yet, I would highly recommend using Disco for it.
Okay.
It's really important. Like, you can use SoundCloud or whatever, or Dropbox, but Disco is just like sort of the industry standard,
Yeah.
Some other tools I use for building websites, so whenever I make a pitch for myself or for my clients, there needs to be a pitch website where, like, in the email, it'll say, like, listen to the music here. You'll click the link. It won't take you to a disco. It'll take you to a website where it has some really cool visuals of the artist. It has a brief bio, and it has a place where you can stream the music.
Mm-hmm.
I like that better than just sending over a disco link, because you get to express the artist. The artist gets to express themselves, and artistry is so important. I'm sure you've heard this from other people as well. If people feel like they're being pitched music for sync, they won't be that interested. Because they really want all sync agencies, sync libraries, sync labels, music supervisors, all these people want to feel like they are helping the next big artist come up, right? So you really want to get the point across that even if it is just music for sync, you want to try and, spin that a little bit so that there's some emotion around it, there's some artistry behind it, and there's like a real power behind it.
Okay.
So whenever I go to pitch music, I never pitch music for sync. It's always music for this artist. And for myself personally, I have 3 different sync bands that I pitch music under.
Okay. And when that's really interesting because that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm not really sure what to do. So I've got like 10 or 15 songs that I'm in the process of naming and getting ready to start pitching. But I don't really have a project behind them because I kind of stopped with my project and just allowed myself to create different genres and styles of music. And I haven't created a name or a profile or anything under that. There's none of the music is on Spotify or anything. So it's like these songs are music for sync, but there's really nothing behind it. So based on your recommendation, you would recommend creating some kind of project or story around those songs to then use to pitch, correct?
100%. That's what's going to set you apart from all the other people saying, hey, here's some music I made for sync.
Ah, okay. So that's a big thing. And when you say the website, what are you creating? Are you doing WordPress? Are you doing Squarespace? And then what are you putting on the website?
Yeah, I use a application called Card with 2 R's. It's great. It's great. I've used Webflow as well. I've used a bunch of different ones. Card is just the best for me right now. It's very simple, and these websites need to be quite simple. You want to give them only the information that's completely necessary. That's true of everything. That's true of music as well. You know.
Yeah.
I really try to live that minimal approach of stripping things back until it's only the pieces you need. On the websites, you need some cool. The goal of the website is to express the brand and to express that it's not just music for sync. There's an artist here.
Ah, okay.
So you want, your name, big bold letters, the project of the EP or album, whatever, in big bold letters. You want some cool artist photos of you. You want the music as a streaming link, whether that be a link to Disco or Spotify or Dropbox. You can embed in most things. And then you want, maybe like a contact button. And that's about it.
For the pictures, what types of things are you recommending? Do they have to be like headshots? Are they band pictures? What types of pictures have you seen do the best or perform the best?
Man, it's hard to say which pictures do the best or perform the best because there are so many other moving parts. So I'm just like kind of shooting from the hip here and giving you what I think is cool. Mm-hmm. People like to see faces. Mm-hmm. So I'd recommend putting your face on there. Okay. But just like, hang out with your friend who has a nice camera and take some cool pictures that are kind of in a similar vibe to the music. Okay. This is like the most challenging part of sync. Yeah. Because it's such a tiny needle to thread. Yeah. You're like, the little hole is so fucking small, but your music in music licensing, in sync, your music needs to be syncable. Like, there are some specific things that like make music really good for sync.
Let's talk about that. What makes your music syncable?
Sure. Lyrically, don't try to be clever. Just be clear. The lyrics and the whole vibe, music for sync is meant to either 1, help sell a product, or 2, add emotion to a scene. I can't think of any other utilities the music would have. I guess to help people remember a brand, but again, that's to help sell a product. So, so you kind of want to make sure that your music is doing one of those 2 things. With sync, when I'm writing for sync, I usually start with a chorus lyric. Okay. Some of my songs that have been placed. Oh, one song that got into a Scottish furniture company recently. Okay. The chorus lyric and the lyric we started with was "Home is where the heart is." Okay. Which makes so much sense for a Scottish furniture company.
That does.
So, but it needs to be cool, because again, people don't want to just sign music that sounds like sync. So it's a hard needle to thread. Another thing is you kind of want something new to happen every 8 bars. Okay. Which is like such a lame thing to say because I don't want people to be like so calculated. Yeah. But it's important that there are many different sections that the company could choose, the company or TV show or whatever could choose from. in your song.
Okay.
So songs for sync tend to be quite dynamic.
Yeah.
I know a sync agency / sync rep that she won't sign a song. She'll look at the waveform before listening to it, and if the waveform doesn't look like sausage links, like it has some small parts, some big parts, like she won't sign it, because she knows that music supervisors will do the same thing, and they'll look at the waveform, they'll click the biggest part and listen to that. So it's so ridiculous and like not really creative.
No.
But these are things that you do need to think about a little bit, you know, maybe not right from the get-go, but later down the line, making sure that your waveform looks healthy.
Yeah. So I do dance music, so it's just one big fat sausage. So maybe cut back on the clipping and the limiting and the
No. Limiting and clipping is great. You need that shit to be loud. What you also need is a section that's down, you know?
Like a really somber bridge or a somber verse, something that's gives that polarity. Okay. So let's move in. We've got kind of what you need to get synced, and if anything comes up past that, we'll kind of jump back to it. But the song is done, it's ready to go, it's uploaded to Disco, you started pitching, you get the email that says, hey, we want to use this song. What's next? What happens? What's kind of the process after that?
If you can email, if you're doing your pitch emails and you get a yes back or a couple of yeses back, I would recommend trying to hop on a call with them like this.
Okay.
Where you get to have a real interaction with them. Because again, the most important part, whether you're working with a sync label, sync agency, sync rep, whatever, sync library, is getting that personal communication and making sure they know who you are and knowing who they are. You want to just be friends, like not in like a creepy, like clout way, but in like a normal friends way, because friends help each other.
Sure.
You know? So you want to build relationships with people. So even before like getting a contract, like just hop on a call with them.
Okay.
And then of course, if you guys like each other, you can move forward and they'll send you over a contract, and you'll want to, I mean, I'd recommend getting legal help if the contract is blanket. I'd recommend getting legal help.
I, as a professional, I actually 2 hours ago just got off another podcast interview with a music attorney based out here.
Nice.
And I think, and I have friends who are attorneys, I think they would always advise, do not sign anything without having an attorney review it.
100%.
That's kind of the number one thing. They are expensive, but especially in sync licensing, making sure that your rights are not being taken away. If you're signing something to like a sync agency, making sure that, you know, for example, they might want some of your publishing. Why would they need any of your publishing? Why would you give that up? That might not be a good deal for you. Maybe it is. It might be best to speak with an attorney. So I always
100%.
I always recommend speaking with an attorney before you sign anything, especially when it comes to your music and your intellectual property. This is stuff you own.
Yeah, so it's real stuff. It's real stuff for sure. And I'm actually really excited. I know this is like so clickbaity, but ChatGPT and its ability to help people work out legal stuff for really cheap.
Yeah.
Like, of course, I feel bad for the attorneys, but they're making enough money. I'm really excited for that to help, you know, struggling musicians who need legal help but can't afford it, and then end up signing away shit that they didn't realize they were signing away. Like, that's so lame.
Yeah,
so I'm looking forward to that.
Really, really crimey. Yeah. So the song comes in. You've jumped on a call. You determined, okay, this is a great fit. Let's move forward. Are you typically pitching to music supervisors, or do you have a sync agent that is pitching for you, or like you said, the sync label, which I guess if they're pitching your music, they're kind of acting as an agent for you.
100%.
So then what's next? You sign the contract. Then what happens?
After you sign the contract, you make sure they have all the assets they need. You make sure they have instrumentals, and make sure they have all the exports that they would need. They'll ask you for them.
Okay.
Make sure they have all your info. This is kind of where metadata comes in. You make sure they got your ASCAP or CSAC or whatever, your publishing information. Yeah. You make sure that they have the lyric for all the tracks, and then you sit back. because at that point, there's not much for you to do.
Okay.
It's now up to them. You signed a contract with them. You most likely are giving them something,
Mm-hmm.
you know, whether it be non-exclusive, exclusive publishing, like you mentioned, master, like I've done actually.
Okay.
And then you wait. And sometimes it can take a long time because the companies need to get you into their system. They need to get to know your music, because, you know, a lot of these companies have teams of 5, 10 people pitching to music supervisors.
Sure.
And those 10 people don't know your music yet.
Mm-hmm.
They know they just signed some new music, but they don't know it. So they don't necessarily, they're not going to go right to it when they get a new brief, right? Unless they're really excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it can take a while. I think it took me like 6 or 9 months until I landed my first placement from when I signed the contract. And I was like really frustrated. I was
wow.
It's been so long, but now I don't even feel like I've done any work for that music because it's been so long, you know? And so now when a paycheck comes in, it's like, oh my God, like this feels like free money, even though I worked really hard on the music.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing, especially if it's non-exclusive. You can, some agency or company can sign it, and, you know, you can land a $10, $15, $100,000 placement. And then next week you get another one. And then next month you get another one. It's like, it can be never ending. It could, you know, that song can work for multiple projects. And we've, you know, I see it all the time. Multiple songs fit for multiple different projects. So what are kind of the fees that you're seeing? So in sync licensing, there's, I know that you obviously have the master and the publishing. So you have to get approval from both. You have to get the rights approved from both, master and the publishing. And then you also have a fee to license the master side and the publishing side. Typically, you know, sometimes they're all in, where that means we'll give you $150,000 or $50,000 for the master and the publishing, or we'll do $50,000 for the publishing, or, you know, whatever. So what are some of the fees that you're seeing in your music, or even friends and in your close circle that are doing this? Are you seeing $500 placements? Are you seeing $50,000 placements? What's kind of the range, and what's kind of the genre that people are going for?
Interesting. I haven't personally gotten, I think my biggest placement so far has been $13,000.
Okay.
Which is fucking amazing. Like, that's crazy.
That'll pay your rent in LA for a month.
For a year. for 1 month.
For 1 month.
Yeah.
In LA.
Yeah. But I also, you know, those don't come super often. I don't want people to get their expectations too high. I also get placements for $500.
Okay.
That's the least amount of money I've made from a placement is $500.
Okay.
I also just want to make a quick statement. Like, I really don't want to be like a guru. Like, I don't want people to think. My manager mentioned it to me the other day. He was like, "Yeah, you're kind of like a sync guru," and I was like, "No, that's like not the point. Mm-hmm. That's not what I want to be at all." Like, and I'm not there. Like, I'm nowhere near there. Like, I live in a room with I live in a house with like 3 of my friends. You know, I'm not like super wealthy or anything, but I'm like living off of my music, which is amazing. And I feel like I'm just like maybe a couple steps ahead of people, of a handful of people. And that's what I want to get across. Just that I'm like maybe just a little bit ahead of where you are and can help you get there. But I'm like, all the stuff that I'm saying also like could very well be wrong. Like I'm not, because I've been doing sync for 4 years.
Not only do you get the fees up front, like the $13,000 that you said, or $9,000 or whatever it is, you also get back end royalties from your performing rights organization, which would be BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, GMR, whatever. SOCAN if you're in Canada. Can you talk a little bit about how those work? Because I know, like you said, with sync licensing, it's 6 to 9 months. It's not like you jump in, you sign the contract, and then 2 days later that song is placed and you're making.
It could be.
It could be, but
it could be.
Likely it's more often than not you have to prepare for it. Take months for the right brief to come in, and it might be a year before that. So how do you prepare yourself and set expectations for yourself to financially kind of budget yourself? Like, oh, I signed this contract that says I'm going to get, $15,000 for this placement, it might be 6 months before that money even comes in. And then you have your royalties from BMI and your performing rights. It might be a year or 2 quarters behind on their revenue. So how are you kind of actively budgeting and preparing and setting expectations when you're going into this?
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think I have great advice for this because I'm not good. Like, I mean, I'm good at budgeting, but
Sure.
I'm not like, my expectations are so strong,
Mm.
so strong. And when things aren't happening quickly, I get frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Same.
I just try not to spend very much money. I've gotten good at cooking, you know.
Yeah.
I've had to, because my first couple of years in LA, I was dirt poor. Like, my parents were helping me pay rent at some points. Yeah, man. So I I got good at cooking because I wasn't able to eat out, so
What's
I
your
had
favorite
to.
thing to
But
cook?
I like breakfast.
Breakfast food? What kind
I
of
like
like
breakfast. Yeah.
omelet or just like eggs, toast, and bacon?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
simple?
kind of all of that, man.
Okay.
Recently, I've been making. I've gotten back into cooking because I was on this long trip where I was able to eat out every meal,
Uh-huh.
and like, because food is so cheap. Now I'm back in LA, and if I were doing that, I'd be broke.
Yeah.
So I need to get back into cooking, and I got really bored with like all the things I was cooking. So I got this cookbook, and I've been using it to help inspire me. And I've been making like Thai breakfast sandwiches with
Oh,
like
yum.
eggs on like an English muffin with like spicy sriracha mayo and cilantro. It's been amazing. So
That sounds
so
nice.
when you're really poor in LA, for me, I found ways to make myself feel fancy. You
Ah,
know, I would splurge on like a really nice bag of coffee, like a really nice bar of chocolate, because it's like $5 or $6 more for the best of it, and you feel so fancy.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
but but I don't think I have good advice other than that.
Okay, that's fair. How many placements do you have total?
10 to 15.
Okay. And so do you see yourself as a sync musician kind of moving forward? Like, is this what you want to do for the rest of your career? Is this something that's kind of a passing fad that you're just kind of using it to, stock some money away or whatever? Or what's kind of next for your project?
I've been really trying for a lot of my life. I would set a goal for myself and I would work towards it tirelessly. And sometimes I would get there and sometimes I wouldn't. I wasn't very good at goal setting. So a lot of my goals were like goals that actually weren't in my control. Like,
Mm.
get a record deal. Like, that's not in my control. It's a bad goal to set because there's so many other elements. So I have been intentionally trying to not plan
Okay.
the future.
Okay.
I've just been trying to work hard, of course, work
Mhm.
smart,
Mhm.
work on things that inspire me,
Mhm.
and let that dictate where I'm going. There's a really amazing quote um, in this book called The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life. The
Okay.
quote is, "I don't know where I'm going, but I know how to get there."
Okay.
So that's a philosophy that I'm trying to live by. I don't know where I'll be in 10 years, but I know the next step that I'm going to take.
Okay. That's I feel like that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't really know what I want to do. I do a bunch of different things. I'm passionate about a bunch of different things. And sync licensing is just one of those things that I just have always loved and I want to at least try it. And I don't want to come back in, 2, 3 years and say like, damn, I wish I would have tried this a little bit harder or
Yeah.
actually tried to get a couple more placements. Because I don't want to live a life of regret. I know that. Um, it's hard though. Like you said, like we live in LA, the global economy is failing. We can't afford eggs. We have no idea what's going on with music. We're in one of those careers that is probably like one of the most difficult careers to be in is music. It's like you're trying to sustain yourself on your own art. Like
Yeah.
all of your money making stuff is up here and you have to turn it into a tangible form in a computer,
Yeah.
playing it out. And then you have
And
to make
people don't
and
people
then you have
don't
to make
pay you
money on it.
for it.
No.
Yeah.
And then you have to make
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because like with streaming, it's so minuscule. Like a million streams on Spotify is only like $4,000, and only a very small percentage of those artists on Spotify are making a living on their music. And Spotify will say day in and day out how amazing this is, but the number is still abysmally low given how many artists are on the platform, which is why I think sync is a really good avenue for musicians to look into, because it's a really good supplemental piece of income as you're growing your career. Um, and you mentioned that you've kind of planned, or sometimes the sync label will plan around a release. Is that something that you do, or have you done that where you have a placement coming out in, say, 3-4 months, and you want to build a release plan around it to maximize its potential? Can you talk a little bit about that and how that process went?
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, I didn't do much work on it.
Okay.
When you sign a deal with a sync label, they really work as a record label, right? So it was the first, when I signed my first sync deal, it was the first photo shoot I ever went to that was paid for by somebody else.
Wow.
So when we got our first cut, when we got our first placement, they just put together the release plan, and of course I signed off on it. They were like, "Hey, we want to do this." I was like, "Cool, go for it." That's the beauty. That's like the beauty of sync and what I've been trying to do recently, which is just let other people like not try to control everything,
Sure. You have to have a team.
And if people want to do something, they should go do it. They're the experts. They're the label. I signed a contract with them because I trusted they're good at what they do.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of, I think a lot of musicians, including myself, are in that same place where they don't have a big budget to hire a graphic designer to create stuff. They don't have to create social media graphics. They don't have the money to hire a photographer because they can be expensive. So based on that, somebody who has music, they have a bunch of music ready to pitch, but they don't have the assets and stuff. Do you recommend they sign with the sync agency, or find somebody that will help, advance this money or pay for that? Or what do you kind of recommend for that?
For someone who has the music but doesn't have the means to hire a photographer, hire a web designer, whatever,
or the funds to hire these
or
people.
Yeah. This stuff is easier to do than ever. You can just like go out into a field with your phone and take a picture of yourself, and you can build a website with one of these applications that makes it so easy to use. And so I don't really think that, definitely people will to themselves think, oh man, I can't pitch my music because I don't have money to pay for the assets to go around the pitch it. But you can do it super, super cheap. You can do it super cheap.
Okay. So it has to be high quality, but it doesn't have to be like professional Taylor Swift level. Like, you don't need Taylor Swift photographer.
No, and the term high quality is so interesting because it doesn't need to be high quality. It just has to match the music.
Okay. That's a good note.
Because it's an artist. You're an artist expressing yourself through visuals, and the visuals should aid to the music. The music should aid to the visuals. So if you've got grunge rock, you wouldn't want a headshot in a professional studio. You'd want a picture of you passed out on the floor or something,
or smashing your guitar.
You can recreate that shit pretty easily.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's kind of all the questions. I mean, you've been really helpful in answering all of these things, and I love speaking with artists in this realm because it's so fascinating to me. And I just love to, sometimes the music really makes the scene or the commercial or the ad or whatever. One thing that I've really been getting into is automotive commercials. They have some pretty epic music, and I love electric vehicles, so they're using very electronic, heavy dubstep, mid-tempo-y kind of stuff. So it's okay, I can do that. I could do that. And then you see, a company when Apple unveils their iPhone. I mean, talk about the ultimate sync when that happens. But it's very cool on how these things kind of come together. And the sound really, really complements the project, like the iPhone, for example, or the vehicle or whatever. So randomly, what are you actively like watching commercials and TV shows and kind of listening to how the music is being used and learning from that? And what are some things that you're picking up on?
Hmm. I don't do that as much anymore.
Okay.
I did that a lot when I was making my first couple projects.
Okay.
Now I'm honestly not making much music for I'm not making music for sync like I used to be making music for sync. I'm at a place now where I'm receiving briefs and I'm making music for those briefs, separate from
Mm.
sync, separate from my projects even. These things tend to be more work for hire buyout things.
Okay.
There tends to be more money in it. But those things, those briefs are like 10 pages long. So I don't really need to be watching other commercials to learn what to write about because they'll tell me exactly what they want it to sound like.
Okay. So how does that happen? Like how do you make that switch from pitching your music to then being sent briefs and having to work within those constraints? Like how does an artist get to that point?
The briefs sort of come, for me at least, they've come after.
Okay.
With the briefs, with the companies that I work with to spec for brief, they need to come after. You need to kind of show what you can do first.
Mm.
You need to have some placement under your belt. You need to prove that you can make good music for sync.
Mm-hmm.
Because when writing to briefs, there tends to be a demo fee. So I get paid when I write to briefs, whether or not I get the placement. And of course, if I get the placement, it's a lot more money.
Sure.
So that's sort of like for me, it's been the next step. First, it was writing for sync, pitching all that music. And now I'm at the privileged position where these companies trust that I can do good work. And so now they send me briefs and I write to them.
Okay. And I think one thing to clarify here is work for hire and kind of the buyout. And what that means is when you're pitching your music, you're retaining the rights to that music. You're going to still own the copyright regardless of if a sync agent signs it and then places it. However, for work for hire, if say for example, Trader Joe's comes to you and says, "Hey, we have a new food product of pretzels coming out, and we need a theme song for this," they're typically going to hire a musician. I'm telling you as if you don't know this, but it's more so for the audience. But
Of course,
they're going to pay you X amount of dollars to then in the contract you will assign the copyright to Trader Joe's or whatever company you're working for, and they will own that song. Therefore, you cannot take it and distribute it yourself. You cannot use it for another project. It is exclusive only to that project. And obviously, the details will be in your contract, but that's typically the difference between a buyout and like work for hire is you're creating something that will then be used that you won't even own anymore, unfortunately.
well, a lot of the times you will still own the publishing, which is really
Yes.
exciting because that means if you make a song for Trader Joe's, you make that big initial fee. You also get money whenever it's played on anyone's YouTube, anyone's television.
Yeah.
I have a deal where I'm doing co-pub with the company, and they gave me an advance. I wouldn't sign publishing away because that is non-traditional.
How can the listeners kind of follow you and keep up with anything and all the stuff that you're working on and doing? And if they have any questions on anything you said in this episode?
Of course, I'm pretty active on TikTok these days. If you have any questions specific for me, you can comment them on my videos and I'll reply with a video answering. A lot of people DM me messages and I tend to just tell them the same thing because it's much easier for me to just answer the question for everyone at once. Because most likely, if you're asking the question, everyone else has a question as well.
Sure.
So yeah, and I post a lot of free like resources on there as well as some paid ones. I have this guide to music licensing that explains in detail my method for pitching music. We talked about it a lot today. There's definitely a good bit more of in-depth information in the guide. I'm also going to be working on a guide to music production, which I'm really excited about because I've noticed I have a lot of friends who just write music and who are really intimidated about production. And I think the way I learned music production is pretty novel. So I'm really excited to put that together for you guys as well.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool stuff. Well, I am always about educating and helping people as well, hence the podcast and having you on. I don't believe in gatekeeping. I don't think that makes any sense to me why you'd want to reserve and hold information from other people if it's going to be meant to help them and change their life potentially, as sync can do and has the possibility to do. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your information and knowledge with us.